extensive holdings in lumber, furniture, and timber rights throughout the Southeast. He had unloaded most of his assets less than a year ago. No one from his family had returned home. There was a portrait photo of Seth as a much younger man. He looked nothing like the poor guy hanging from a rope in Ozzy's grisly death scene photos. But then who would? 20 minutes later, the lawyers were back. Roxy parked them in the conference room on the first floor. They stood by the window and watched the languid pre-lunch traffic around the square and waited. Occasionally they would whisper to one another, as if the room had bugs and someone else might be listening. Finally, Mr. Brigance entered and welcomed them. There were forced smiles and stiff but courteous handshakes, and when they were finally seated, Roxy asked about coffee or water. Everyone declined, and she closed the door and disappeared. Jake and Stillman had finished law school at Ole Miss 10 years earlier, and though they had known each other during that ordeal, and often had classes together, they ran in different circles. As the favored son in a family who owned a law firm claiming to be 100 years old, Stillman's future was secure before he briefed his first case in contracts. Jake and virtually all the others were forced to scramble for employment. To his credit, Stillman worked hard to prove himself and graduated in the top 10%. Jake was not far behind. As lawyers, their paths had crossed once since law school, when Lucian ordered Jake to file an unpromising sex discrimination case against an employer, one represented by the Rush Law Firm. The outcome was a draw, but during the process, Jake came to despise Stillman. He'd been tolerable in law school, but a few years in the trenches had made him a big shot in a big firm with the requisite ego. He wore his blonde hair a bit longer now, and it flipped up around his ears, contrasting nicely with the fine black wool suit he was wearing. Jake had never met Mr. McGuire or Mr. Larkin, but he knew them by reputation. It was a small estate. To what do I owe this honor, gentlemen? Jake began. Oh, I think you've figured it out by now, Jake, Stillman replied smugly. I saw you at Mr. Hubbard's funeral yesterday. We've read his holographic will, and it's rather self-explanatory. It's deficient in many ways, Louis McGuire asserted gravely. I didn't prepare it, Jake shot across the table. But you're offering it for probate, Stillman said. Obviously, you must think it's valid. I have no reason to think otherwise. The will came to me in the mail. I was directed to probate. Here we are. But how can you advocate for something as shoddy as this, Sam Larkin asked, gently lifting a copy of the will. Jake glared at him.
In 1 mile, take exit 17 on right to Briggs Cheney Road.
Far superior to the rest of us because you bill by the hour and get paid for it. In your well-educated and learned opinion, this will is shoddy and thus invalid. Therefore, everyone else's opinion should fall in